Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to your favorite news destination. You're watching In Your Interest with me, Kabir Naqvi. And on the first segment on IYI, we talk about Iran and Iran's laid out 3 conditions for the end of this war: recognitions, reparations, and of course future guarantees. But even as Tehran sets the tone for this agreement, United States' president says the war is already a victory for the United States. Well then, why are missile barrages still being exchanged? And the biggest question is, if the war is won, why is the fighting still on? 12 days into this war, and tonight, Iran has spoken. Not through missiles, not through drones, diplomatic words. A message attributed to Mojtaba Khamenei, the latest Iranian supreme leader, was read out by a presenter on Iranian state television, carrying a series of sharp warnings. The message vowed revenge for Iranians killed in the conflict and said that Tehran would not hesitate to retaliate. It also described the possible closure of the Strait of Hormuz as a strategic option that Iran intends to keep on the table. So the choke point continues. And the statement also warned that Iran could open new fronts in the conflict if necessary, and cautioned neighborhood countries hosting American military bases that those facilities could become targets if used to launch attacks on Iran. Now, at the same time, the message called on the Iranian public and the armed forces to remain united and resilient in what it described as an imposed war on Iran. But the statement comes on the back of 3 clear conditions set by the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian. For any ceasefire to begin, the first condition is recognition of Iran's legitimate rights. In simple terms, this means the United States and its allies must accept Iran's right to keep its full nuclear fuel cycle, including the ability to enrich uranium. Number 2, they are calling for the United States to pay financial reparations for the destruction of civilian infrastructure and cultural sites. And finally, number 3, they want binding international guarantees that no future military strikes will ever be carried out against them.
If the Americans and the Israelis are escalating, then why should you not expect Iran to escalate? What should Iran do? Should it say, yes, we are a defeated country and you do whatever you like?
I think there is a big problem there, because neither side can easily make the concessions that the other side wants. So who can play a role? What can be the form of mediation? What is the bottom line in terms of concessions Iran can make, United States can make? I see a lot of difficulty ahead. And we are going to be the big sufferers if this continues.
The best case scenario for us would be that this whole campaign ends quickly, and one way or the other. Because if you drag it out for weeks or months, then the consequences could be even worse.
Well, you just heard 3 of our former foreign secretaries. However, these terms from Iran appear to be non-starters in Washington and Tel Aviv. The primary war aim for the United States and Israel remains the total dismantling of Iran's nuclear program, not its recognition. Furthermore, paying reparations to Tehran is a political impossibility for any American president. There is also the issue of leverage. Western leaders argue that granting a non-aggression guarantee would remove the very military pressure they believe is necessary to keep the regime in check. These demands come at a time when President Donald Trump has publicly claimed victory in the Operation Epic Fury. He said that the war was over in the first hour and that the United States and Israel have already won.
Take decisive action to stop the threat posed by the terrorist regime in Iran with Operation Epic Fury. Is that a great name? Well, it's only good if you win. You know, you can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. But we won.
Well, the name of the mission might be actually epic, but have they been able to actually obtain the objectives of the mission? Because the facts on the ground tell a different story. The conflict has now entered day 12 and is actually intensifying, continues to. Iran has just launched its 40th wave of missiles and drones. Around the world, there is growing concern that this could turn into a long, drawn, and costly war. Even President Donald Trump has followed his victory statement by saying he is determined to finish the job. Many expected the Iranian state to collapse under this level of pressure. But several factors are keeping the regime standing. China continues to buy Iranian oil, providing a vital economic lifeline, whilst diplomatic and intelligence support from Russia remains steady. And at home, the security forces have remained loyal to the leadership, suppressing any internal dissent. Calls of taking on to the streets by Netanyahu, well, nobody's heard them. We're effectively stuck in a stalemate of sorts, given the 12th day of the war. Airstrikes are causing significant damage, but they have not forced a surrender yet. An esteemed set of panelists with me on the broadcast, and the big questions that we are asking. If Iran's three conditions that they've laid out are unacceptable, then what will be the end game? Trump is claiming victory. But what is the realistic exit strategy for the United States' forces? Is this another Vietnam that's been copped up for Donald Trump? And what if Iran is still standing after 12 more days of bombing? What are you going to say next on that particular front? With me on the broadcast, Ambassador Meera Shankar. Many thanks, Madam Ambassador. I'm going to quickly put my first question to you. What do you make of this? Iran has outlined three conditions for ending the war, Ambassador: recognition of its rights, reparations and guarantees against future attacks. And from a diplomatic standpoint, how pragmatic are these demands? They're clearly non-starters in Washington and Tel Aviv. So are we really stuck in a stalemate? We earlier heard the former Foreign Secretary Kamal Sibal. He says we're going to be the biggest sufferers. Mr. Shyam Saran is of the opinion that United States is the aggressor. And what do you do if there is no stalemate? Who comes and does the mediation? Are these negotiation tactics, ma'am? Or are these genuine red lines? How do you read it?
Well, clearly the Iranian leadership is wary of entering new negotiations after the earlier negotiations were used as a cover to launch this attack.
Exactly.
When they were, when Iran was actually moving forward on agreeing to reduce its dismantle its nuclear stockpile, not to stockpile enriched uranium in future, not to now or ever into the future seek a nuclear bomb. The one issue which remained outstanding was Iran's insistence that they should retain the right to uranium enrichment for peaceful purposes up to thresholds allowed by the IAEA for non-nuclear weapon states under international safeguards and inspections. Now, the US was adamant that Iran cannot be allowed to have the right to enrich uranium, but they could have had further talks.
Yeah.
There was an off-ramp which was being discussed in some circles in the US, and that was that Iran could be allowed to do laboratory scale uranium enrichment. So the US could claim that they were not allowing Iran to enrich, and Iran could claim that its principle had been respected. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to look at that. Iran's current demands, of course, are based on the fact that its leadership has been decimated. This is the second round of, devastating bombing that it has been subjected to in 2 years. But these are difficult demands for any US or Israeli leadership to accept. But what I do think that the US could claim is that they have destroyed Iran's nuclear program and ballistic missile program, and then they could stop bombing or have a ceasefire with effect from some date. After which it's possible that Iran may also start halting attacks. We don't know. We don't know. I mean, my sense is that instead of an agreement to halt the war, unilateral action by the US and Israel,
Yeah.
as they did last time with the bombing, where the US pushed Israel into a ceasefire, I think that could be the trigger for something. Then,
Okay.
somebody to look at the possibility or the space for mediation between the two.
Okay.
But I think it'll begin with some demonstration of an earnest of sincerity
Yeah.
by the US and Israel.
And
Whether that will be forthcoming, we don't know.
exactly. And Ambassador, there's
Uncertain
this
right
two different narratives that are doing the rounds. Israeli assessment seems to be completely different with what, and how Donald Trump is looking at these developments. Let me quickly introduce the other panelists also. Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, defense expert and ex-chief integrated defense staff and commander in Chief Western Naval Command. Many thanks for taking on the time, Admiral. And Manish Chand, CEO, Center for Global India Insights, also with us on the broadcast. Admiral, talking about the military point of view, after nearly 2 weeks of intense strikes, US intelligence reports, I'm going to quote some of that, US intelligence reports say that Iranian regime is not close to the collapse. What does that essentially tell us about Iran's military resistance? We're sitting on the 12th day. Donald Trump, according to him, the war has already been won. But then why are missiles flying in the air?
Well, thank you for getting me on your show. I think we have to pay attention to what Ambassador Meera Shankar just now she said.
Yeah.
When will Iran run out of its ballistic missile? It is very unknown quantity because, mind you, they have a very, very large stockpile. That's number one. Second thing is that IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, is a totally an independent organization which actually does not take orders from the president or the prime minister, whosoever is in the chain. It only takes from the supreme commander. Now, the supreme commander right now, as you know, that the entire sort of decision-making body is in a bit of turmoil. So we would think that the IR is absolutely autonomous, which makes life very difficult because they will continue, everything is by and large automated in the sense that they look at a target and the firing begins to start from you don't know. Most of them are underground missiles from the surface to air and back to surface. And as the ambassador said that, you only mentioned that a lot of the inputs are being given by the Chinese and the Russians.
Yeah.
Chinese through the Baidu's satellite. I know that Chinese have about 270 odd satellites over the Indo-Pacific, and they know exactly who's where. So targeting is not a big problem, with China. So I would like to believe, firstly, that none of these three demands are actually they will not be able to meet, particularly when it comes to Israel, because both these countries want to sort of wipe out each other. Okay. So unless the Israelis and President Trump decide that, okay, we should put a halt, the Iranians will continue to fire everything in auto. President Trump has said that we have achieved our aim. That's a very political statement because otherwise he might get impeached by his own senators back in US.
Yeah.
They're quite upset with him. So
and the electorate, you heard the bite yourself, Admiral. The entire electorate, he says the operation was called Epic Fury. I mean, all the emphasis on the name, and the crowd breaks into this rapturous applause as if, the name of the mission has already done what the objectives and the military set out to do in the first place.
No, you are right. You are absolutely right. You said it. The point is that he has got a supporting crowd of MAGA.
Yeah.
Some of the senators who are, part of MAGA, but they are now getting upset every day.
Yeah.
Because, they will have little more casualties. You just
casualties, sir, look at the math. The math is not in their favor. Will the aftermath be in their favor? That's a completely different thing. But the math is certainly not in their favor. $50,000 Shahid drones. And that's an upper benchmark. To intercept them, look at the amount of money that they actually have to shell out. The Patriot system, the THAAD missile system, anywhere between $3 million to $12 million. And if they fail to intercept, the catastrophe is going to be devastating and fatal as well. I'm going to
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Let me bring in a geopolitical understanding. The global power dynamics is also something at play. Manish Chand is with us on the broadcast. The Admiral just spoke about the war of attrition. This is turning out to be a long-drawn war of attrition. How do you look at it, Manish? Trump called it a victory. Iran is still firing missiles on the other side, threatening shipping lanes. We all saw Mojtaba Khamenei's latest, he's broken silence after being elected as the new supreme leader. He says the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is going to be in place. So is this now turning into a war of attrition with each passing day? United States might have started it out, but they can't seem to get out of this warring rut. Is this Donald Trump's Vietnam?
It was a giant miscalculation on part of the Trump administration or the US-Israel combined that once they get rid of Ayatollah Khamenei, the regime will crumble. I think that was a huge, huge miscalculation. And what we are seeing now, what you describe as the war of attrition, is going to go on for quite some time, even though there may be some sort of ceasefire or whatever, but this will go on because the objectives of war are not clearly defined. Trump is claiming that, there's nothing else to bomb. And, he can declare victory any moment. And that's probably the only off-ramp, where he unilaterally declares a victory and then, the low-intensity war of attrition goes on. But what you have to understand about that Iran has already laid out the three conditions. And those are very difficult conditions for US and Israel to expect, to ask for reparations, to ask for right to recognize Iran's sovereignty, and that implies use of nuclear energy. The third part is kind of doable, guarantee, because unless you give that guarantee of some sorts, there won't be peace in the region because Iran has an existential threat from Israel.
But are United States' security guarantees realistic at all? What's the credibility of that United States?
What we are talking about is some sort of off-ramp, because this war is proving to be devastating, ruinous. The global economy is, already being rattled and ruined. So the point is that this is in nobody's interest to keep prolonging this war. And I think realization is sinking. Where the Trump has made huge calculation about regime change is that he did not realize the regime is so deeply rooted, embedded in the structure of Iranian society. If you talk about the regime is not those handful of people. If you look at it, Iran's population is around 90 million or so. And if you look at the people who are still supporting this regime, despite what we saw, those popular protests and all that, even if you bring it down to 10 to 15%, and there is data to support that, what we're talking about, like 15 million people. And also, Iran has a kind of a mosaic, decentralized mosaic resistance model, which means all 21 provinces. Now you can see why Gulf states are getting targeted, even after Khamenei was eliminated, because all these provinces, the security command structure, once the supreme leader goes, they are on autopilot. They keep firing, and that is what we are seeing. And so this is going to go on, and Iran...
The crowd is rallying behind Mojtaba Khamenei. And he's given his first address, and the entire crowd is rallying behind Mojtaba Khamenei.
Right. That is the big thing, because you thought that you get rid of one person and make him an icon of this thing.
Yeah, but it's not the individual, it's the institution. And Netanyahu's, entire rhetoric of come onto the streets, topple the government, we're with you. It seems like rhetoric is now outpacing what's actually happening on the ground. The ground realities are being outpaced by the rhetoric, which is where, Madam Ambassador, I want your inputs on this. This seems to be a very delicate balancing act. We earlier heard Kaval Sibal, we earlier heard Mr. Shyam Saran. What's your own viewpoint? Look at what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. The External Affairs Minister has had about 3 different conversations with his counterpart, Mr. Aragji, and Iranians are ready to let go of all the Indian vessels because India imports about 85% of its oil. The Strait of Hormuz is practically very strategic for us. On top of that, a dozen Indians have been injured. An Indian was killed, an Indian sailor was killed on that US-flagged oil tanker off of Basra in Iraq. So there seems to be a real delicate balancing act. What are some of the lessons that India now needs to take on day 12 of this war of attrition? Let's call it.
I mean, firstly, I think that we need to keep a balance because our interests in this region are so varied. We have a special strategic relationship with Israel, which has been a major defense partner. We have a major partnership with the UAE, which is one of our topmost economic partners in terms of trade, oil, gas, Qatar for
Yeah.
gas. We have a large expatriate population in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, 9 million. With Iran, they are our access to Afghanistan and Central Asia and beyond. And also the route for the North-South corridor. They used to be a major oil and energy partner, but because of American sanctions over the years, our trade with Iran has come down, leaving China as the major strategic and economic partner of Iran at the present juncture. We have historical ties with Iran because we are the second largest Shia population outside Iran. And they have
That's right.
traditionally looked upon the Iranian leadership as some kind of religious leadership for the Shias. So there are very complex and multiple dynamics at play in the region. And it's important for India to balance these interests, to keep space for itself, not get totally aligned with one side or the other, and look after its own interests, which is the security of the diaspora, the safety of the diaspora, which is ensuring our energy security, and which is ensuring, in some sense, that we are able to tie up supplies of energy from other sources if there are continued problems in the Straits of Hormuz. Because it's not just the blockage of the Straits of Hormuz.
Yep.
Production has stopped in some of the Gulf countries from whom we were importing oil.
It's being
like
felt back
gas.
at home as well, ma'am. It's being felt back at home. Take a look at Bengaluru. Take a look at so many of those PGs. People are now in the office. I'll give you an example. Today, I caught on 2 people who were perusing through Amazon websites for induction heaters, induction stoves. That's the reality that we're living in right now, ma'am. Ma'am, before I go on to the Admiral, one question.
I can tell you that I have bought one too.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. So smart thinking. Well, the ambassador has got herself an induction heater. That's a great word, a message for all those out there. Maybe you need to go to the shopping, mart, get yourselves one as well. Ambassador Shyam Saran said that Iran and United States are the real aggressors here. Iran is the victim. Do you agree with that? Very quickly, and then I'll bring in the Admiral.
In this case, yes, it's a war of choice for US and Israel. Because the Iranians were negotiating in Geneva, and they had made major concessions. They had taken a very constructive attitude on the nuclear issue.
I remember, Ambassador, I was talking to you the same day the Supreme Court struck down on those Trump tariffs. And we were essentially decoding and talking about Prime Minister's visit to Israel, when in Geneva, the US delegation was sitting right across the Iranian delegation, and just 3 days later is when the attack actually took place. And I think you began your opening submissions with that statement. Admiral, if Iran refuses to back down and the United States and Israel, this coalition, refuses to concede to these concessions, these conditions that have been put out, are we looking at a prolonged regional conflict? What's your opinion? Clearly, the panelists believe that this is going to be a long-drawn effort, and Tehran is threatening heavier operations. If its ports are attacked, it's going to hit back at all those US bases. Militarily speaking, what escalation does Iran have? Iran's supreme security advisor and military advisor, Larijani, he earlier put out a statement. Let me quickly read that out. He says, Donald Trump said, I could cut off Iran's electricity within an hour, but I did not do that. However, this is what Larijani says, had he proceeded with that, it would have taken only half an hour for a complete power outage to engulf the entire region, and the darkness would become a suitable opportunity to track down the fleeing American military personnel in the region, and he says, hunt them down.
Well, let me just make a submission. Iran is a civilizational country, just like India is. We have history of 10,000 years. So are the Iranians. Now civilizational countries don't die. They never die. They always come up and they will be back.
Yeah.
So I would say they may be down, but they are not out. That is for sure. What can it do further? They can immediately activate all the underwater explosive, which is all automated. And it is not with the Iran government, as I said, it is with IRGC. Moment they find that their entire integrity of the sort of boundary is getting sort of, bombed and finished by the United States, all these underwater explosives will get active. And let me tell you, it's not easy to clear those. And I can tell you that Straits of Hormuz can remain closed for a very long time, for which nobody has an answer at the moment. Nobody has an answer, because if they activate, then nothing can go in and nothing can go out. Of course, it also makes a difference. The Iranian money also comes from those,
That's right.
Yeah. So I think that, it is in interest of the whole world. Whole world's economy is sort of, scattered now. And I think it's in the interest of everybody that if it can be mediated by some third party, Oman was already doing it.
Yeah.
But I don't know
look
why
at this. Vladimir Putin has thrown his hat in the ring. He says, let me mediate. I'll do it for you. You want to be the global peacemaker for the rest of the world? Let me make a peace deal for you, Mr. Donald Trump.
Yeah, but knowing what Putin is doing in Ukraine.
I understand. That's why I was saying rhetoric is outpacing the ground realities. And, boxing analogies come to my mind. Tiring out your opponent. Even in a David Goliath situation, we all know what David was, capable of actually. And Donald Trump also has to probably go back to the drawing board and understand all of that. But for now, many thanks, Madam Ambassador. Many thanks, Admiral. Manish, always a pleasure to have you with us on News 9. For now, the bombs, they continue. The oil markets, they remain on edge. You just heard Madam Ambassador and the Admiral. And diplomacy is nowhere close to a breakthrough, but some things gotta give. Hope has to sustain. If neither side is willing to concede, this conflict could stretch far longer than anyone expected. And the biggest question remains, if this war is nearing its end, or is it just entering one of the most dangerous phases?